It's actually profoundly simple to address emotional trauma, and it's through sound therapy. Because these emotional traumas lie in our energy field, you can simply use frequencies to essentially vibrate them out of your energy field. And this is backed by conventional medical research. And so there is a way to release these things very easily, doing the sound therapy at home. And it's not expensive. It's like a one-time cost to buy a biofield tuning fork. It's really that simple.
If you haven't done so already, go ahead and click that subscribe button down below. It's a little red button. You punch that, and it's going to notify you every time we put out a new episode that can help you improve your bone health. And then also, if you haven't done so already, head over to bonecoach.com, sign up for the free 7-day osteoporosis kickstart. That's going to walk you through everything you need to be doing right now to get on the path to improvement and stronger bones. After you do those two things, go ahead and press play on this episode, and I'll see you inside. Welcome to this episode of the Bone Coach Show. Joining us today to explore if your health issues are caused by emotional trauma, plus how to do an emotional detox, is Wendy Myers. Dr. Wendy Myers is a naturopathic doctor and founder of MyerDetox.com. She's a detox and bioenergetics expert, as well as the #1 best-selling author of Limitless Energy, How to Detox Toxic Metals to End Exhaustion and Chronic Fatigue. Wendy is the host of a top 100 rated podcast, the Myers Detox Podcast, about protecting your health with detoxification. She's a naturopathic doctor, as I said before, a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, a nutrition consultant, and a certified holistic health coach. Dr. Wendy Myers, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, so let's get into this. Usually I like to start out by just getting into a little bit of why people even got into this field. And I'd love to start out with, your role in the health field and how you determined that emotional trauma was something that needed to be focused on and we needed solutions for.
Well, I've always been very, very much into my own health journey and trying to figure out what was going on with my own health. And I first discovered I was having health issues after the birth of my daughter, but over 10 years ago, 12 years ago. And, and I just felt like something wasn't right in my body. I just wasn't feeling good, wasn't losing weight, wasn't sleeping well, having bouts of anger and things like that. So I went to the doctor, said, figure out what's going on with me, do all these tests. So she did all these functional medical tests. And I just found out over time that I had all these, like the hormone levels of a menopausal woman. And then I dug a little bit deeper and I had a lot of heavy metal toxicities. And my first love is heavy metal detox. That's what my website, MyersDetox.com, is all about. But, once I had reached a certain point where I was eating a perfect diet, I was taking all the right supplements, I was exercising, several days a week, I was sleeping, I was doing stress reduction, I detoxed for many years. I still didn't feel as good as I felt like I should have, given the amount of effort that I was putting into my health, which is pretty much my hobby and my full-time job. A lot of you guys listening to this podcast you're really into your health, and trying to tweak it and fine tune it and find out what's going on with you. And so I discovered at one point that, that emotional trauma, it plays a huge role in people's physical health issues and them feeling stressed and fatigued and tired. And there's a wealth of information and research on the internet and amazing researchers like Professor Bessel van der Kolk and many, many others, where the ACEs study, where we see in this study done by Kaiser Permanente with 17,000 people that 67% of people have one or more adverse childhood event that happened to them in their life. And they have a dramatic increase in diseases of all kinds, including osteoporosis. And so so for me, I've been working on emotional trauma, my own journey, for about 6-7 years. And I started using software, bioenergetic software that helps identify what emotional traumas you have, which was fascinating. It's called Ness Health. So I, just been really focusing on this because I worked with thousands of patients, primarily doing detoxification, but I found that there are a lot of people that were looking for physical solutions to their physical health issues and only doing physical things, supplements, programs, things, detox, things of that nature, weren't always getting better or not getting to the point where they wanted to go. And that included myself. And so I wanted to, it's always searching for like, I didn't understand why that was. Like, why are they doing everything right and still not feeling good, or just kind of feeling flat, just feeling blah, like waking up, they have everything to be happy for and they're just not, or they stay in crappy relationships or jobs that they're not in alignment with them. And so, going on a journey to discover your emotional trauma and releasing it goes a long way to helping people step into their joy, step into peace and love and in alignment with their life purpose.
Gosh, so many people, when they go in to attack their health issues, right, they focus on the optimal doses. What are the supplements? What are the nutrients? How do I change the food, diet, all that stuff, the exercise, the go, go, go. And it's trial and error. And obviously you get to a point where you've done a lot of the things that you can do in that area. And so many people stop there. And I think what you're talking about here is such an important thing that we need to discuss. And could we just outline even what is emotional trauma exactly?
Yes, where emotional trauma, there's a couple different kinds. Like it can just be anything that you weren't emotionally ready to handle at the time. It could be just something like your dad yelling at you and you just vividly remember that. Or it could be, just actual physical, emotional, sexual abuse from a primary caregiver or anyone. It could be just neglect. It wasn't anything really horrible that happened to you, but your parents just were physically or emotionally absent, where they took you to the soccer games, they fed you, but they just were just not present because they were just dealing with their own mental health issues or depression and things like that. And that was certainly my case. I had, my parents took great care of me, but after their divorce, they were just both very, very depressed and just weren't emotionally available, or didn't have really to have a lot of knowledge about how to emotionally support a child, make a child feel seen and heard. And that's really, I think, endemic in society today, where children are being neglected. They're just, have the electronic babysitter, the iPad, the phone. The parents can do what they feel like doing. And so that's a big problem. And then there's things like PTSD. So what I just spoke about before was childhood development trauma. But people also have one-off events that were very traumatizing them. They went to war, they had a rape, or they had just a car accident, or even an illness. People can have health PTSD, financial PTSD, they lost their home or what have you. And so these are events that they have an energetic resonance. So what researchers have found, like conventional medical researchers like Dr. Carlos Ventura, who's a cardiologist, he found that these emotional traumas, they don't reside anywhere in our physical body. They don't reside in our brain cells. They have an energetic frequency and presence in this energy field we have around our body. It's about 10 feet in diameter around our body. And this is where these emotional traumas lie. And this is where they have to be addressed. And this is why conventional talk therapy, a lot of people have problems, they go to talk to someone. Like Professor Bessel van der Kolk, he's very funny. He said that yapping doesn't work. That just talking to someone about your traumas, while it may make you an expert in your neuroses, it doesn't help you to release these emotional traumas that are in your energy field. So there's some very specific protocols I'll go into later about how to release these traumas actually really easily and permanently. And so it's almost like you erase them from your timeline, like they never happened. But for me, like the most important message I want to convey to people is these emotional traumas are not only causing anxiety and depression and bad moods and things like that. They are also contributing to your physical health issues, including osteopenia and osteoporosis.
Gosh, a couple things came up as you were talking. I was just thinking about even some things in my own past that I was thinking about, like specific events that stood out to me. One of which was this was actually when my mother and my stepfather ended up getting a divorce. was we were in their room. He was coming to hit me, and I was on all fours in the corner of the room, and my mother stepped in between me and him, and he launched her, and she tried to catch herself, but she hit her face on the corner of the wall and almost knocked all her teeth out. And I remember, and as I'm talking about this, my heart right now is starting to beat faster. And as you were speaking about that, that was the first thing that came up in my mind. And that's something that stuck with me. And she stood up and she just yelled, "I want a divorce." Right. That stands out to me. And I think we really need to think about, if you're a parent or a grandparent, all the different things that can affect our kids from a really young age. Something else that you brought up that stood out was, we have the technology babysitter, right? The iPad, the screens, and the parents are just absent. They're not actually there engaging with their kids. And that can be an issue too. And I'm not saying, for us, we still have iPads and things like that, but there are certain times where we specifically are very intentional about trying to show our kids the affection and the love and tell them how special they are and things like that. So I'm really glad you brought that up too.
Yeah. And there's a big problem out there with neglect right now. It's so easy to neglect your child and just give them the electronic babysitter and the iPad. And, I find a lot of people that are on social media, they're addicted to social media. It's designed to be very addicting. And I'm guilty of this also, where you get on those Instagram, on those reels, and you're just reeling away, and like 2 hours go by. You're like, how did that even happen? And your child's doing the same thing. You're doing it in separate rooms and you're not connecting. And that can add up over years, And so, not to try to make anybody feel guilty, but it's just about having some awareness around this.
Mhm.
And I have some interesting statistics I wanted to go over. So the fact that there's 67% of people have at least one adverse childhood event. And adverse childhood events can have really long lasting effects. People can have increased incidence of obesity, diabetes, depression, suicide attempts, STDs, sexually transmitted diseases, heart disease, cancer, stroke, COPD, lung issues, broken bones. They have increased incidence of broken bones. They can have increased incidence of smoking, alcoholism, and drug use. They even have reduced life potential, where they have lower graduation rates, lower academic achievement, more lost time from work. And some really interesting statistics from the Kaiser Permanente ACEs study is that people that had 4 or more adverse childhood events, they were 16% more likely to be smokers. They were 18% more likely to have attempted suicide, even having a 12 times incidence of attempting suicide. They can have 50% of people have depression that have 4 or more ACEs. 28% of people have used illicit drugs or illegal drugs. 12% of people are overweight or obese if they've had 4 or more ACEs. 16.7% of people are alcoholic. We have also 2 times more likely to have cancer, 4.5 times more likely to have heart disease, 3 times more likely to have financial problems, 2 times more likely to have stroke, 4 times more likely to have lung disease. And it just goes on and on and on. So it's something that can, these emotional traumas can dramatically impact our lives in so many different ways.
Gosh, I mean, another personal share even from me is like when I was my father passed away at a super young age when I was 2 months old, and as I was growing up, I just remember being really sad about that, and thinking about that. What would it be like to actually have him here with me? And I carried that with me. I ended up going in the Marine Corps to kind of follow in his footsteps because he was a Marine. And after I got out of the Marine Corps, and even during that time in the Marine Corps, I smoked cigarettes a lot. I drank as a coping mechanism. And I knew part of the reason was because of the sadness for my father. my father's passing from when I was a kid. And I continued that on after I got out of the Marine Corps, where I remember I had drank so much almost every single day for a couple of years, where I remember uh, telling my mom, Mom, I'm an alcoholic. And, I reached a certain point where I knew I was just damaging my health, and I was damaging my bones too, obviously, but I didn't know it at that time. But yeah, like using some of these different substances as coping mechanisms, it's probably not going to have, it's not going to have a good effect on your health long term. So you have to address the root of the issue.
Yeah. And people, they're just trying to self-medicate. They're just, people just want to seek pleasure. They just want to feel good. They just don't know why they don't feel good. And so when you really kind of are ready and you want to get to the root cause of so many of your mental health issues, anxiety, depression, and you feel like you have some adverse childhood events, and that like I said, you have to be kind of ready to address these. Working on emotional trauma is one of the most profound and important things that you need to do. And in my research over the last few years, it doesn't involve, surprisingly, going to hours and hours of expensive therapy. Because on my own journey, I did probably 10 years of talk therapy, because I was just trying to work on self-improvement. I was really interested in psychology, and it's actually profoundly simple to address emotional trauma, and it's through sound therapy. And sound, because these emotional traumas lie in our energy field, you can simply use frequencies to essentially vibrate them out of your energy field. And this is backed by conventional medical research that I've been, like, with Dr. Carlos Ventura, Professor Bessel van der Kolk, and just so many other researchers in the field. There's Bruce Lipton. There's just so many people out there that where they talk about using frequencies, sound therapy, using bioenergetics to release these traumas from your energy field. And when you do this kind of work using a biofield tuning fork, which is kind of the primary method that I suggest people use, it's really fascinating, where you can sit down and do a 30-minute session doing biofield tuning fork therapy, where you just kind of hit this fork and it has this frequency, and that vibrates these traumas out of your energy field. You, like, for instance, I had this one period, I was with my ex-husband. I was with this person. I knew I needed to leave him. And I always thought, why am I with this person? I don't actually like him, you know, and he treats me terribly, and I'm just not happy. Like, why am I staying with this person? And so I started working with the biofield tuning fork on self-hatred, which everybody has, on some level, especially if you're on social media a lot. You can really learn to hate yourself. But
Keeping up with everybody else's lives. Yeah.
yeah, comparing yourself. But, so I started working on self-hatred. And when you work on these traumas specifically, you can have an intensification of the very emotion that you're trying to release. Okay. And so I had this one day where I was at the beach with my ex-husband, and I went to the bathroom to put on my bathing suit. I looked in the mirror, and I just had this wave of self-hatred come over me. And I had already decided I was leaving him, like, in a few weeks. But in that wave of self-hatred that was coming up to release, because I'd been doing biofield tuning fork therapy, I realized that I started having these thoughts like, I can't leave him. Who is going to love me? Who is going to want me? I should stay with him because it's safe, and I know he loves me. Even though I'm not happy, at least he wants me. And it was the next day, I didn't feel that way, because this emotion had come up and out. And I just realized, I was like, I'm with him because of this self-hatred that I have, that I developed as a child, this childhood development trauma that everybody has to a certain degree. It's estimated it's up to 95% of people have some form of childhood development trauma. And And it was very, very profound for me. And so, and there's a lot of people staying in jobs that they hate, staying with partners they don't like, tolerating family members, abuse of them, and just so many other things going on with them, that if they work on releasing these emotions and these traumas, they step so much more into alignment with who they are, and they get rid of this baggage so that this repressed joy and peace and love can really shine through, because literally it's repressed. You just have all this baggage you're constantly dealing with. It drains your energy. You have this inner constant critic. People can have perfectionism and people pleasing and all these different personality characteristics that were coping mechanisms because of the trauma that they dealt with, you know. And so there is a way to release these things very easily, doing the sound therapy at home. And it's not expensive. It's like a one-time cost to buy a biofield tuning fork. And it's just, it's really that simple.
If you're listening to this or watching this right now, I would love to know. Let me know in the comments below what you're learning, or if what Dr. Wendy is sharing with you right now, if that stands out to you, share this with a friend or somebody you know that you think could benefit, because this is a topic that's really not talked about that much. And I think, even sharing your own personal experience about your relationship or the job or those kinds of things, that's really empowering for people to hear, because there are probably a lot of people in those situations right now that are not happy, that feel a lack of safety and security on their own, and maybe just sticking it out, for even if they're not happy, right? Everybody deserves to be happy and be able to address these things. So I'm glad we're talking about this. Let's talk specifically about, can we go through, and maybe actually one other thing I'd want to just touch on is, I'm sure there are probably, I would imagine there are some people right now listening that are already doing talk therapy, right? Or they're seeing a therapist or someone else. And I'd love to talk a little bit more about specific protocols that maybe they could add into their plan or their rotation or things like that could really kind of help them move to the next step.
Yeah, and I don't mean to bash talk therapy or anything like that. I mean, I loved talk therapy when I was going, and my daughter's in talk therapy right now, and it's great. You can become an expert in your neuroses, which is a very valuable, and it can help you navigate your relationships and make better decisions, and have a third party kind of having an objective viewpoint of what's going on with you and what you should do and all that stuff. So it's great, especially if you don't have someone close to you that you feel can give you good advice or direction. So it has its place. But if you really want to get to the root cause of what's going on with you, and not only that, but just having an awareness that there are traumas that happen to you, or you have negative emotions that you're not consciously aware of. Because you have to be consciously aware of traumas and negative emotions to be able to talk about them in therapy, right? And so there's a lot of things that happen to us as children that happened to us before we were able to verbalize, before we were able to even speak, or before we were able to intellectualize these things that were happening to us. So we develop coping mechanisms that become a core part of our personality. So you can't, like, people have people pleasing. They become bullies. They have other things going on with them, like perfectionism, that where they just workaholics, they just work their way out of it. They work to deal with their anxiety or what have you. And so you can't talk your way out of that, out of your personality. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of people, everyone has certain negative emotions they need to work on: powerlessness, worthlessness, self-hatred, self-deprivation, and the other one is survival fear. And so everyone has those 5 emotions that they need to address, and they can do it successfully using biofield tuning fork therapy. Right? So this is a form of sound therapy. But there's about 50 other emotions. I have a chart. I created a course called the Emotional Detox Program. It's a 30-hour course that goes into like this on a very deep level. And I have a PDF in there that has about 50 different emotions that people can work on, give them an idea of things they need to work on. But more importantly, there's a lot of things people need to work on they're not consciously aware of. Like for me, I thought that I really liked myself. Like I love my job and I love what I'm doing and I'm helping people doing it. And my business is starting to get really successful. Yet I had a lot of self-hatred that I wasn't aware of, and it was making me stay with a person that was very toxic, very draining, energy draining. The person was a narcissist, and it's just surprising when you start doing this biofield tuning fork therapy. You really you realize how much denial you have. You can work on denial as well. There's a lot of different emotions and things you can work on, but I think people they don't realize a lot of stuff that they're holding on to that they need to work on. And so I illuminate a lot of these issues and talk about the difference between developmental trauma and PTSD and all the different therapies out there. There's also bioenergetics. There's a bioenergetic software called NES Health, NES Health, that was really instrumental for me. And you do the scan and you can see all of the traumas that you have and what organ that they're affecting. So it's incredibly interesting. There's 45 years of research behind this software. And you
Mm.
can see all of your emotions that are resonating for you, positive and negative. There's so many different data points, so much information in this scan, and there's protocols to help release the stuck emotions and stuck traumas that you find in the scan. And I talk about vagus nerve stimulation. A lot of people, because they have stress and trauma, their vagus nerve, which innervates all of their organs and is responsible for digestion and their stress response and just peristalsis and going poop, all the digesting your food, all of your blood sugar levels, all these different things. I talk about how stress can cause from trauma can cause poor vagus nerve tone, and how you need to use a vagus nerve stimulator to kind of correct that while you're getting rid of this underlying trauma. And so we just touch on a lot of different issues in my emotional detox program.
That's great. I want to make sure everyone listening can get access to this program, and that if we can provide a link or something like that,
Yes.
if you could just share that with me, I'll put that in the show notes. Anything else that you think is important to touch on as it relates to emotional trauma and our health?
Yes. So I wanted to specifically talk about bones, since
Hmm.
you're the bone coach.
Yeah.
So there was a really interesting study that I dug up. It was a meta-analysis, and so it talked about how there's a significant biochemical and physiological effect of stress, and it's being recognized as exacerbating diseases like osteoporosis. And so a big part of people having stress and having a high stress set point where they get stressed very easily and they can't calm down, a big factor in that is emotional trauma. And so, in regards to osteoporosis, there's U.S. military veterans diagnosed with PTSD have a higher risk of developing osteoporosis, as well as civilians. And it was also found that 73 female Holocaust survivors had a 3.5-fold increase in the prevalence of osteoporosis compared to controls, suggesting that psychological stress is a big risk factor in osteoporosis. There's also a specific trauma as well in self-devaluation. So when people have a trauma around, or they just have developed self-devaluation, that is the emotional trauma involved in developing osteoporosis and weakened bones and higher risk of fractures. And so when you look at the work of Dr. Hamer, who developed German New Medicine. He studied 60,000 cancer patients and their emotional traumas and where they had cancers in their body. And so he was able to correlate, and he did all these brain scans and just all this amazing research. And so he was able to correlate the emotional traumas people have and where they had health issues in their body and cancers in their body. So people that have self-evaluation had more bone cancers and bone issues. So I thought that was really, really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it's not always a physical threat, right? That can contribute to that stress, can drive that stress response, can contribute to, not just our bones, but leaky gut, issues with your weight, your blood sugar, all that stuff that you were just mentioning too, hormonal imbalances, all those things can be impacted if we're constantly in this state of stress. So addressing these underlying issues is super important. I think this was actually a really great conversation, probably more personal sharing than I've done on any other episode before. But I think this was really good, and I really appreciate your time and coming chatting with our audience.
Yes. Yeah. And so if anyone wants to learn more about what I'm talking about here and addressing your emotional trauma, I have a free masterclass that you
Perfect.
can take, and you can check that out at emo-detox.com/Kevin. And so it's emo-detox.com/Kevin. So you can
Perfect.
reach that. Yeah, it's an
And we'll put
amazing
that in
free
the show notes
masterclass.
too. We'll put
Okay,
that in the
great.
show notes too.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So we'll put everything, everything we talked about here, Dr. Wendy's emotional detox program, then the masterclass you just mentioned, and we'll put everything else down in the show notes. And we can find that over at bonecoach.com/Wendy Myers emotional detox program. So we'll find all that there. I want to thank everyone again so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, if you please leave a review on the podcast, it only helps us reach and serve more people. If you're watching this on YouTube right now, hit the like button, the share button, share it with somebody you love. And I just want to thank you again, Dr. Wendy, for your time. We'll see everyone else in the next episode. Hey, it's Bone Coach Kevin Ellis. Hope you found that episode helpful and that you enjoyed it. Just one last reminder, if you haven't done so already, head over to bonecoach.com, sign up for your free 7-day osteoporosis kickstart. It's going to tell you everything you need to do to start getting on the path to improvement. Hope you found this helpful. I'm your Bone Coach, Kevin Ellis. I'll see you soon.